Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime episode review. This one's going to be for episode 86, which is called Kozuchi's Will. And this was a much needed episode. I think this was definitely one of the best episodes of the arc. I felt like this was the episode that sort of brought all of the features of this arc together. We finally got Onoki's motivations, and they are as we expected, but the scenes about like how they did it, the details of what happened, I thought were really, really well done. And after a couple of episodes in a row now of it not being the best, like definitely being a little bit meandering, pacing being a bit all over the place, this covered a lot of ground. Obviously the first half of the episode primarily on just the explanation of the emotion for Onoki, why he's doing this, because of Kozuchi's death, and then in the second half of the episode getting into the whole idea of, what's going on within the Stone Village, that there's a coup d'etat basically, and very clearly without Onoki's lead, they are showing a will of their own, in that, would Onoki make all the decisions that like Ku is making? Perhaps not. And especially with what Boruto was saying towards the end of the episode to him, bringing up the point that I think was always going to be the contradictory point for him of, you're making these artificial beings, but in doing so you are making artificial beings, so do they not have a will? You're just sacrificing a new group of people basically to save another group of people. Is that not just as bad, but in a way worse, because you don't treat them as having a will? So very interesting with Boruto presenting that idea of just, shouldn't you protect, in a way also these artificial beings that you've made, and how that links into the whole Mitsuki part of this. And this is where this arc I think has so much potential. This is why I'm persisting with this, and I'm still reviewing the episodes even when they're not the best, because this arc has so much potential because of the whole Mitsuki, his will, him being an artificial being, and that being a point that they bring up at the end. That part of the reason Boruto hits home on that point and he thinks about it so much is because of what he's been through with Mitsuki, because he knows Mitsuki is dealing with the idea that because he's an artificial being, he doesn't know if his will is kind of manufactured or not. From Boruto's experience with Mitsuki, and then with the other fabrications, as they call them now, he is convinced that they are sentient, they have their own will, and they deserve to be treated as basically just as valid as humans. And Onoki clearly hadn't thought about this before, but obviously has to double down on his plan, because his plan is to use them as an army to protect the youth of the Stone Village. And yeah, I suppose getting into the details of what happened, we knew it was because of the death of Kozuchi basically, but getting the details on what happened and the scenes about how they showed it, I thought was very, very interesting. One, the idea that he confronted someone who was stealing basically the secrets of the Stone Village is... I noted a similarity to basically the start of original Naruto, of basically the key event that starts off original Naruto is it's Naruto stealing the secrets, but it being kind of him manipulated to steal them by someone else. And it's a similar situation of just the idea of, here's two people with kind of the same goals of eventually wanting to become the leader of their village, and in one case it is the start of a hero's journey for Naruto, but it's the end of Kozuchi's journey here. And it was meant to be this contrast, I suppose, in a way of, is it because of the peacetime that this happened and there wasn't as much maybe security focus, they weren't as on guard as much, and especially with the setup just before that of Onoki telling Kozuchi basically what his will is, to never run away, always be this strong kind of beacon within the village. And the second Onoki finds out what actually happened, he realizes that his advice may have just got his grandson killed, because he specifically didn't run away, potentially because of that advice. Now obviously that's Onoki connecting those dots when we don't specifically know that was the case, but I think the emotion hits home really well, that you get it. And the way they showed it, of him kind of basically punching the ground, and they show the blood coming out of his fist, the rain starts, it got across that this was such a turning point for Onoki as a character, of going from being very happy, just kind of liking being around his like grandson and stuff like that, helping Kozuchi a little bit to run the village, and it's this turning point of him actually wanting to do something again. And this is where the whole idea of the fabrications comes back in. He reads Kozuchi's journal, and the idea that he wanted to, his dream if he became Tsuchikage was that he wanted to kind of protect everyone, and Onoki takes that will, Kozuchi's will, and interprets that as, I need to protect basically the youth of the village and never allow a tragedy like this to happen again, which starts this whole path of Onoki investigating artificial soldiers, the initial weak tests, and then him meeting that scientist. And the key ingredient that sort of was the turning point in the research is that all the fabrications that they use here, all the Akuta, use an aspect of white Zetsu cells, I suppose is what they're trying to say, which sort of makes them a bit more controllable. That was a very interesting reveal, in that I think it more or less heavily implies that that is the reason behind, in a way, I suppose, why they have more free will and they seem a little bit more sentient, but it's also probably why there is this ultimate instinct to like kill if they have to, which was the big reveal of the, I suppose, present day story, with like Ku and the other fabrications wanting to extend their life, which involves killing humans, taking their hearts, and using that to extend their own life, stabilize them. And Ku being like, no, Onoki wouldn't want us to kill, but the end result of this, of him seeming reasonable, is that he ultimately comes to the conclusion that we're not going to allow ourselves to just die. If it comes down to it and we have to do it, Onoki's not here to authorize it, we'll do what we have to do, implying that they will kill to extend their own lives, and that is the sort of will, the sentience that they have, that they have the ability to break free of the kind of control of their master. So that's another thing that kind of shows that Onoki probably hasn't accounted for that, and it's notable that he hasn't been back in the village for a while to see what's happening. So when Kako arrives at the end to fight Boruto, because Onoki and Boruto are now on opposite sides because of the point that Boruto made about the will that these artificial beings have, it was a really interesting point, and that's why I think the episode accomplished so much, in that we had backstory for Onoki, we got characterization for Kozuchi as a character, we got more insight into the fabrications and the Akuta, and especially the relationship of Onoki and Boruto kind of going up and down over the course of these last couple of episodes, eventually settling on the fact that they do have a disagreement, as much as Onoki tries to get across the point of, we have no issue, I don't want to hurt anyone, this is purely to protect our village, we're not creating an army to attack any other village or anything like that. But it's obviously ignoring the fact that Leaf Shinobi have died in all of this, that on the missions that they've sent these other fabrications out on, they have actually killed to accomplish their goals. So there is an issue that Onoki has to address, that he doesn't have as full control over them as he thinks he does. And like, there's obviously other things, like he's I suppose do we know if Onoki is aware that Kozuchi's been captured? I think at the very least he knows that has happened, but obviously he's not having her be put at risk, but she is still captured. We get a brief shot of Shigadai kind of roaming around, trying to stay undercover in the Stone Village, so we'll have to see what he's up to. He wants to get back to his father to reveal what's going on, and I assume they're going to use that as more or less the way where that brings the Leaf Village into play to stop what's happening here. The setup of the fight at the end, that Kako and Boruto are going to fight, is interesting, because this is obviously going to be this, I suppose, notable moment of Onoki's going to be there to watch this happen. He's going to, I suppose, see Boruto and Kako kind of talking, and see that Kako does actually have a personality. If they let Boruto sort of win the fight, he's going to witness, I suppose, Boruto being very cautious about, I suppose, delivering any sort of a killing blow. And potentially, if Kako is losing, getting across that emotion of like he could be killed at any point here, and it is this loss of life, and him maybe realizing the errors of his ways. They could go a lot of ways, but just with this one fight, in that it's one of the least developed fabrications that we have, but the point that they could make of how this fight goes is, I think, really, really interesting, because obviously Onoki is kind of lost in grief. That's the interpretation that we're meant to have here, that he's just trying to make amends for what he did, in that he blames himself for the death of Kozuchi, and is making all these justifications to try and, in his mind, fulfill Kozuchi's will as a way to sort of make amends for blaming himself for what happened. So I'm very, very interested to see how they go about resolving this, because I can't see them just leaving Onoki as a villain, but at the same time, like this plan kind of has gone wrong at this point. There are problems that have come into play. He has to make amends for this somehow, and that's going to be very, very interesting to see what they do. I noted that they didn't really have Kuretsuchi give her own thoughts specifically on the death of Kozuchi all that much. So when she kind of comes back into the story, that could be an interesting dynamic as well to see how they do it. I was very impressed that after a bunch of episodes that spanned their wheels a bit, they didn't really accomplish all that much. They did so much with this one episode that I think it's really brought the plot all together. Of course, we didn't check in on what Konohamaru is up to, what like Naruto and Shikamaru back at the Leaf Village are kind of doing with regards to like keeping track of what's going on. Mitsuki, we didn't get any shots of Mitsuki, but like he was discussed towards the end, which I did like. That let's not lose sight of the fact that as much as it's become very stone focused, the core dynamic of this arc is Boruto and Mitsuki's friendship, and specifically Mitsuki and him finding his own will. And I like how in the exploration of the fabrications and what a will actually is, they've more or less revealed the fact that Mitsuki does have his own will. The fact that he's sided with these fabrications and is doing this and is, I suppose, abandoned his village, is him making a choice that if he didn't have control, he probably wouldn't be able to make. So it's all about getting that across, and I think Boruto has learned a lot from this already, so there probably still has to be another kind of key moment for Boruto gaining an understanding of Mitsuki, and potentially Mitsuki learning as well, to allow them to communicate enough to kind of become friends again and resolve all of this. But I think this episode did so much good work in terms of this arc, getting it back on track, that it feels like we're sort of there and thereabouts in terms of getting into the, I suppose, end game of what's going on here, in that we're going to get a fight in the next episode. It looks like we're going to bring Inojin and Akun back into things, because I suppose what they're trying to do with Akun, the Akuta that kind of Inojin is sort of training and raising in a way, is that they're presenting the idea that here is one of the more mindless soldiers, but it's actually sort of learning from Inojin, and that's probably one of the best examples of these artificial beings having their own will. So we'll see how exactly they use Akun as they go forward. I suppose they're going to try and create a difference between Akun and like every other Akuta, as like a way to show that they do learn, because the one thing they sort of haven't addressed with the fabrications is that they haven't been alive all that much, so they haven't had all these years of growing. So in a way it is this even darker thing of like these beings that have been alive like maybe a handful of months, maybe a year at most, are all of a sudden fully grown, expected to be like the guardians of the village, when the people they're trying to protect, the kids, are much more older and experienced in some ways than these kind of artificial beings, where they're kind of they are just programmed with a certain amount of memories and then have to learn everything on the fly. That's what we're getting with like Sekie specifically, I think, as well as like the girl fabrication and her like obsession with like clothing and stuff like that. She's learning these things about kind of human culture and what it is to be human. That's why they always ask questions about like, what does it feel like to have your heart pumping and stuff like that. So Very, very interesting stuff. But gonna end the video there. That's my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on what I felt was a really, really strong episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.